Hello, this is Sam Gerrans from samgerrans.com. Today is Friday, March 31st, 2023, and the topic today is Russians to jail man after daughter's picture, ? Now, I spent quite a lot of time going through media, and we're going to look at this article, and we're actually going to look at two articles because I didn't know about this story, so I came across it in the Independent. I think it's the Independent, which is one of the papers that I often look at. Now, I seem to be picking on the Independent, but the thing is that it's just a very good example of the type of propaganda that we get in the West. I didn't know about this story, so I looked at it, and then I looked at it again. I thought that there must be more to it than this. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to look at this story, and then we're going to look at the Kommersant, which is a Russian newspaper. Now, Kommersant is something like the Russian equivalent of the Financial Times. It's a business newspaper. There are two main business newspapers. It's one of them. It's I've met Kommersant journalists, and they're usually, well, the ones I've met anyway, are pretty serious dudes. So it's not like this is it's not the Sun or the Mirror or something, or the Daily Mail or something like that. It's a fairly serious newspaper. So what we're going to do is just kind of go through the Independence version of this story, and then we'll have a look at the Russian version. And I've translated the Russian version using Google Translate, but I got it set up so that if there are any little nuances in the translation, I can sort of correct it, or at least compare it with the original Russian, just to give you some more of a perspective. Anyway, we'll start with this. We'll start with the English one and just see how we go. Now, believe, love, and hope. Believe, love, and hope. It's all about gushy words. If you pay the attention to the use of language in the media, which I do, you begin to realize that most of the words are to do with feelings. Very little of it's to do with analysis. So accused of, or considered to be, or criticized by, or emotional. These kind of words are supposed to add some validity to what it is you're reading, but actually they don't add anything at all. They're just gushy, mushy feelings. That's all they've really got. So, believe, love, and hope. Daughter's letter to father fleeing Russian prison sentence. Alexei Moskalyov, originally detained after his daughter Masha, they haven't spelt Masha correctly, drew an anti-war picture in school. So here we are. This is the backstory. Masha drew an anti-war picture in school, and now the father is on the run from the police. You see, well, what could be simpler than that? So anyway, let's get into the details of it. The 13-year-old daughter of a Russian who has gone on the run to avoid being sent to a penal colony following investigations sparked by an anti-war picture she drew at school, has told him not to give up and urged him to believe, love, and hope. If you've ever seen Wag the Dog, or if you haven't seen the film Wag the Dog, it was originally a comedy. It looks more like a documentary now. It's all about feelings. Oh, well, believe, love, and hope. Oh, well, you see. And what's quite clear, the sequence of events was Masha, incorrectly spelt by the Independent, drew a picture at school, an anti-war picture at school. Now these evil Russians suddenly saw anti-war picture, jumped on this evidence and ran off to arrest the father. Right? This is from what you would understand reading this in the West. Okay, I'm not by any means saying that the West is the only place that has propaganda. All countries which are subject to what I talk about in my broader presentation, i.e. technique, as per Jacques Ellul, everywhere has propaganda. In fact, Ellul wrote two books, one about technique, or the technological societies it's called in English, and the other about propaganda. You should read them both because they go together. Propaganda is an intrinsic part of technique. Anyway, we're not getting into those sorts of details here, but quote, "Hi Dad, I really want to ask you not to get sick and not to worry," the letter said. "Everything is fine with me. I love you very much and know that you're not guilty of anything. I'm always on your side and everything you do is right," she wrote. Well, I mean, this is puppy dogs and sort of sugar plum fairies, isn't it? Who could possibly argue with any of this? I mean, if it's gushing, it must be true. So those evil Russians. Written neatly on lined paper, and the letter ended with, quote, "I love you" in English, and the words, "You are a hero" inside a heart. Well, I mean, it's nice that she loves her father, and I'm sure her father loves her too, but this isn't really news, so let's get into the details of it. The case of Alexei Moskalyov, who came under police investigation last year. Oh, last year. I see, last year. Okay, so apparently this picture is something more recent. Over the anti-war picture drawn by Masha has resonated widely across Russia and internationally since the father was placed under house arrest this month and the teenager was taken to a children's home. I see. Okay, because I haven't read all this. I just looked at the first bit, and I like to read them fresh so that my responses are, they're kind of from the heart, as it were. No, it's true. This is the way it's supposed to be. That Masha drew a picture, and now everything's changed. So Masha was in screenwriting terms, this was the initiating event. This was the thing that kicked off everything else. Masha drew a picture, and then the dragnet tightened around her father, and now he's on the run, but she still loves him. Okay, so I mean, who could criticize this story? It sounds so wonderful, doesn't it? And the teenager was taken to a children's home. Mr. Moskalyov vanished from his home during the night on Tuesday, hours before being sentenced to 2 years for discrediting the Russian armed forces. Now, the way this is presented, you'd get the feeling that he's going to carry the can for his daughter's drawing of a picture. That's the way it's presented. I mean, please comment below and tell me if I'm wrong, but this is how I read this. Mr. Moskalyov's current whereabouts are unknown. A human rights lawyer, Dmitry Zakhvatov, said on Wednesday that Mr. Moskalyov had been in touch with him and sent him a copy of a letter that Masha had written him from the children's home where she has been living ever since early March. So I think this is fairly clear. The cause of all of this was Masha's letter, and now all of these evil things have happened, right? Any more of this? Yes. The powerful head of the Wagner mercenary group is the latest person to defend Mr. Moskalyov. The surprise intervention by Yevgeny Prigozhin, founder of the Wagner private army that is fighting for Russia in Ukraine. Well, that's not actually correct. It's not a private army at all. It's subordinate to the Russian military forces, but we won't get into that. Called the verdict on Mr. Moskalyov, quote, unfair, especially in view of the fact that his daughter Masha, spelled correctly this time, will be forced to grow up in an orphanage. Well, I don't know what Mr. Prigozhin said on this, but let's just carry on. Mr. Prigozhin asked the prosecutor to review the verdict and also requested that lawyers associated with Wagner be allowed to work with Moskalyov's defense. Mr. Moskalyov's lawyer, Vladimir Bilyenko, sounds Ukrainian, told Reuters that he was in favor of both requests, even if he was unsure of Prigozhin's motives. I'm ready to accept any help that will help my client. Okay, so this was what this paper is presenting. Masha drew a picture. Her father is now in a load of trouble. Mr. Prigozhin, we're just getting the point in again that it's a private military organization where that's not actually true. For some reason, he's defending him, and the lawyers are grateful for this help, although they don't understand why Prigozhin would want to weigh in on this. Responding to a reporter's question during a briefing, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov implied that Mr. Moskalyov was a bad father, lamenting that what he called the, quote, very deplorable situation with regard to the performance of his parental duties. He declined to comment on Mr. Prigozhin's words. And this is a bit of a problem that the Russians have with their international public relations, if you want to call it that. It all comes across like this. And let's just read this again. A very deplorable situation with regard to the performance of his parental duties. They really know how to sell a line, don't they, the Russians? It's ghastly. It's this breeze block kind of presentation. I mean, they're enemies to their own selves on this one, but I think that they don't care. I think they're just settling down to get on, with the war, and then they don't actually care what the West thinks of them anymore, because correctly they've understood that there's no negotiating with the West. The West doesn't see contract or covenant as binding. So what can you do? So they've given up. But despite all of that, their presentation is absolutely ghastly. The prosecutor's office in Tula, south of Moscow, did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Prigozhin's request and on the investigation into Moskalyov's escape. Well, it's not quite an escape. He did a runner. I suppose you could call it an escape, but it's kind of a kind way of putting it. Anyway, Later on Wednesday, in a short audio message laced with expletives, Mr. Prigozhin angrily rejected the idea that he was motivated by, quote, political ambitions. Mr. Moskalyov, 54, came to the attention of the authorities last April, after Masha, then 12, drew a picture at school showing Russian missiles raining down on a Ukrainian mother and father. So I've understood this correctly. This was the initiating event. It was that Masha drew a picture, and after drawing that picture, her father was then he then encountered the police, or whatever you call them, whatever the security services were. And that's how it all went forward. Now I'm just having to change something here so I can show you another article. Now this one is originally in Russian. So this is, as I say, this is Kommersant. And what I'm going to do is we'll read this together. Now I have had a look at it, but not in much detail. So we'll just have a look at some of it and see whether the Russian presentation gives us some facts which start to make a little bit more sense. So the defamation case, we're in defamation case, was complicated by escape. This is a ghastly translation, but it's a machine code translation, but the facts of it are right. It sounds not very good in English, but there you are. The Federal Penitentiary Service, stated that Alexei Moskalyov escaped from house arrest on the eve of the verdict. So there's a verdict coming, and this is the way they're presenting it. So Moskalyov was due to be sentenced in a court of law, and he did a runner from his house, and this is the way that these actual events went down. The Efremov Inter-District Court of the Tula region found 53-year-old Alexei Moskalyov guilty of repeatedly discrediting the army of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. I just kind of hit that point again. Repeatedly discrediting the army. Now, you may not like this, you may not agree with it, but the fact is that Russia is at war with NATO. And like any country which is at war, it has certain standards that people are not allowed to breach during war. And one of them is discrediting the army. So that's what he apparently did. And you will find that the same things hold true in any other country. Certainly they hold true in America. I mean, you try speaking out against their bombing of Iraq or of Syria or of, any number of countries. They take a very dim view of it. And this is what Moskalyov did, apparently. No mention of the daughter right yet. Just to note that this is what they're saying. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison for 5 anti-war publications in Odnoklassniki. Now, Odnoklassniki is a Russian sort of Facebook thing which is really geared around people who went to school together. So that's how it works. Odnoklassniki means basically schoolmates or something like that. Mr. Moskalyov previously stated during the process that he had nothing to do with the publications and asked to return his daughter to him. 13-year-old Masha has been in an orphanage since his father was arrested on March 1st. He is raising his daughter alone. Again, no mention of Masha's, amazing painting here. Nothing to do with it. On the announcement of the verdict on Tuesday, Mr. Moskalyov did not appear. The regional department of the Federal Penitentiary Service told Kommersant that he had escaped from house arrest. Well, they used the same word, escaped, so I guess I'll stand corrected on that one. Lawyer Vladimir Belyenko told Kommersant that he did not find the daughter of the convict in the orphanage on Tuesday. The child was allegedly taken to a culinary competition. This sounds so awful, but in translated Russian. The word here, which they're saying allegedly, is yakoby. Yakoby, supposedly. It expresses, allegedly it was too sort of legalistic, it just expresses doubt about the veracity of a particular thing, yakoby. So she was supposedly taken to a culinary competition. Now, if you don't know the way that schools and nurseries and orphanages work here, they're full of what's called krushki. Krushki is sort of like, extracurricular activities. So this is, it may have been complete lies. Maybe they really were holding her hostage in some dark room somewhere. waterboarding a 13-year-old. But it is also quite likely, given the way that these sorts of institutions work here, that she was actually just gone, she was, making flapjacks or something. I mean, this is really how things are here. So anyway, let's carry on, find out what happens next. The case of single father Alexei Moskalyov from the Tula region received public outcry in March when the man was arrested on charges of repeatedly discrediting the Russian armed forces. So this is the backstory. He'd repeatedly been discrediting the Russian armed forces. Those Russian armed forces, the sons of mothers who are not in the numbers, of course, that the Ukrainians are being killed, are laying down their lives, are being maimed. This chap found it in himself to go online and start bad-mouthing the Russian military at a time when Russia is at war, not with Ukraine, clearly, but with the whole of NATO. This is the backstory. All I ask you to do is to note that to this point in this story, there has been no mention of Marsha's famous painting or drawing or whatever it was. Okay, this was not the initiating incident. This was not the thing which made this happen. Anyway, let's carry on if we can stand any more of it. Then it turned out, I see, then, let's just check the Russian here. Тогда выяснилось. Okay, then it turned out that his 13-year-old daughter Masha, back in April 2022, drew an anti-war drawing at an art lesson. Since then, the police have been, quote, looking after the family. And just to be clear, he's a single parent and he's now on the run. What's supposed to happen to the daughter? Lawyer Vladimir Bilyenko told Kommersant, having found anti-war posts on the page of Alexei Moskalyov in Odnoklassniki, the police charged the man with an administrative article on discrediting. This is a terrible machine translation. Discreditatie, it just means that he was found guilty under civil law of discrediting. It means discrediting the Russian army, which in any country at war would be something that you would expect some kind of action from. But this was a civil case, and the court fined him 32,000 rubles. Now, just to put that into some sort of perspective, 32,000 rubles is about 350 pounds. I don't know what that is, maybe $400. It's an administrative fine. This is the extent of what happened to him, okay, at that point. By the end of December 22, a criminal case had already been initiated. By this time, Masha did not attend school. I want to just state this again. By this time, Masha did not attend school. To continue. After the defense, she herself asked her father about this, as she was afraid of the police and the FSB officers who came to the school. So, why am I not going to school, Daddy? And so, but he's a parent. You are obliged under Russian law to send your child either to school or to homeschool. A child has to get an education. She's still of school age. I'm just giving you the kind of the fuller context, at least so far as presented by Kommersant. On March 1st, Alexei was arrested and placed under house arrest, and Masha was transferred to the Efremov Juvenile Rehabilitation Center. That's just a sort of a kind of mid-article tagline. Since then, according to lawyer Bilyenko and local deputy Olga Podolskaya, father and daughter have not communicated. The lawyer, as Kommersant reported, sent complaints about violations of the rights of the child to the Prosecutor's General Office and the Investigative Committee. Social Security, in turn, Social Security, let's just check this, Soцзащита. Yeah, this would be the equivalent of what you have in England of the social services. Okay? So the social services, in turn, went to court with a lawsuit to limit the parental rights of Alexei Moskalyov, pointing out that the daughter may be in danger when living with his father. Living with her father is what it means. The court on restriction of rights is scheduled for April 6th. Now, I only know what I've read from these two articles, But I do know that children get taken away from their parents all the time in the West. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we left, because frankly they're unpredictable and completely arbitrary in what they do. In Russia, it's that there is a process. It's very legalistic and so on. But what I'm trying to say to you, that whatever, I don't know the details of whether Mr. Moskalyov is a good, bad or indifferent parent. But I do know that his daughter was not going to school. And if you don't go to school and you can't prove that you're home tutoring or whatever it is over a certain period of time, you come up against the social services just like you would in any other country. Okay? There's nothing unusual about this. What I'm trying to say also is that, at least given what Kommersant has got to say about it, and Kommersant, as I say, this isn't some, it's not a kind of yellow journalist. These journalists really care about their reputations, and this is not the Daily Mail or something. It's much closer to, not exactly the same as, but it's much closer to something like the Financial Times. On Monday, 27th of March, the Efromovsky District Court considered the criminal case against Mr. Moskalyov in 6 hours, interviewed witnesses, including the director of the school where Masha studies, and heard the arguments of the parties. The representative of the prosecutor's office pointed out that the man, quote, realizing criminal intent, end quote, and desiring the onset of socially dangerous consequences, published 5 posts on Odnoklassniki criticizing the special military operation. That's what SVO stands for. 4 of them on July 29th, 2022, 1 on July 30th, 2022. Mr. Moskalyov stated that he had nothing to do with these publications, asking to meet with his daughter, and emphasized that he did not write insults. Okay, so I don't know what the details are. They said he did, he said he didn't. This is the backstory, but these online posts, the content of which we do not have, which drew sufficient attention for him to be made a kind of person of interest by the security services in this country, which is in a condition of war. It might seem like a joke to you because you're in the West and far away and all the wars are somewhere else, but this is an actual war. Whether you think Russia is to blame or you don't think Russia is to blame, whatever, it doesn't really matter. The fact is we are in a condition of war, and Russia is fighting a war in which more people have died than, more people died in the entire Vietnam War on the American side. Already in 1 year, or just over a year. Well, according to Scott Ritter, I think it was, I hope I'm not misquoting him, or maybe it was Colonel Doug McGregor. Do listen to both of those men if you want an actual insight into what's going on with this war. But leaving the details of the war to one side, what didn't happen was that Masha, sat down in school and just picked out of her mind some drawing of Ukrainians being mercilessly murdered by Russians, and then all of this kicked off. That's not what happened. That wasn't the initiating incident. Okay, let's finish this up. Employees of the Federal Penitentiary Service did not bring him to court as he, quote, repeatedly violated the established ban. Kommersant was told in the regional department of the department for the first time. For the first time, Alexei Moskalyov violated the rules of house arrest on the night of March 15th. Margarita Rimar, head of the press service of the Federal Penitentiary Service of the Tula region, explained, while the defense of Mr. Moskalyov claims that there was no violation. Okay, so they said they did, they said they didn't, etc., etc. Okay, let's just read up the last bit. On Tuesday afternoon, for the first time since March 1st, Mr. Bilyenko was allowed into the territory of the rehabilitation center where Masha Moskalyova is kept. Quote, however, the child was not there. End quote. The director of the center gave me Masha's drawings and crafts for her father, but said that the girl was allegedly, they've used this word allegedly again, it's Jakob, supposedly. It expresses doubt, but it's not some sort of legal doubt, legal question, taken to a culinary competition. It's a cooking contest, he said. Whether Masha returned is unknown. Ephraim, deputy, what they mean is this center's deputy, Olga Podolskaya, told Kommersant that her requests and calls from the social services are being ignored. The administration of the Rehabilitation Centre and the Office of the Ombudsman for Children in the Tula region did not answer numerous telephone calls, blah, blah, blah. Okay, look, I'm sorry about the tortuous English there. It's a very on-the-nose translation, but I think you understand the gist of it. It's simply, according to Conversant at least, not the case that Marcia drew a picture and now her father's on the run and in prison, or all the rest of it, or they will want to put him into prison. I just want to give you some perspective on the cherry picking of information, the infusion of emotional terminology into the Western presentation, so that you just, what I noticed, especially when I was in America, is you have the weaponization of compassion. So if it's a puppy dog, or somebody starts crying, or something's unfair, all rationality just goes out of the window. And we're supposed to believe that, in this case, that Marcia drew a picture, and now these evil Russians just decided to arrest her father, and now he's heroically somewhere on the run because his daughter's picture was so threatening to the Russian authorities that they couldn't countenance it, and this is the way they responded. No, that's not what happened. That's not the order of events. The order of events is that he, or somebody with access to his internet connection, pretending to be him, went online and said some very derogatory things about defamatory things about the Russian army online as a public statement, and that's what attracted the attention. The picture is nothing to do with it. Well, certainly he's not a primary mover in this particular drama. Anyway, if you still believe the media, well, it's time to start thinking for yourself. Anyway, I currently upload to Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube and Substack, so please like, share and subscribe on all platforms. It's free to do, but a valuable way of giving back. Go to samgerrans.com and drop your email in the box to subscribe to my Substack newsletter and get all new content delivered to your inbox. I back up my mailing list so that if big tech counsels me, we still have options. I work outside the mainstream and have no corporate sponsorship. If you value what I do, you can help keep the lights on at samgerrans.com/contribute, or upgrade to a paid subscription on my Substack to access my more detailed work as well as comment, Substack being where I read all feedback. I continue to make my legacy projects available free. Summaries and links are at samgerrans.com/books. Finally, I post news, thoughts and announcements to my Telegram channel at t.me/samgerrans. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.